What's up, guys? As promised, today we are going to be working on the mini off-road mower. Earlier this month I posted a picture on my Facebook showing how strikingly similar this thing was to a vehicle in Grand Theft Auto 5. One of the characters, Trevor, actually has it's called the Nagasaki Blazer ATV, and this thing looks frighteningly similar to it. So part of me is kind of like, maybe I should kind of mimic that build, sort of build my own Nagasaki ATV instead of calling this thing a mini off-road mud mower, because let's be honest, there really is nothing mower related about this. Same with the go-kart, which is currently under a cover. I've said that once before, that there's really no lawnmower parts on that anymore. This is kind of going the same direction. But anyways, we're getting off track here. Today's plan is to do wiring. Over here you can see I've got a fuel pump, Briggs & Stratton fuel pump. I've actually already got one of these on the Murray. There's the part number for those of you interested. I've got a fuel filter and a series of little fittings. And of course, a ton of fuel line. We've got both the 1/4 inch rubber fuel line, and I've got 3/16, which is what these Makuna carburetors use. I have one of these same style fuel pumps sitting on the Murray. And I got to give a shout out to a guy, Robert Spencer, who actually told me I was going to need to add a fuel return line to my tank because I was going to put too much fuel in that carburetor. I figured that was probably not going to be a problem because you've got a float bowl in here which should stop fuel flow. But as it turned out, he was correct, and I had a little bit of fuel oozing out of this gasket here just because it was just kept packing fuel into this thing. So last time you remember getting the battery mounted, we did that I think in the last video. I got a coil right here, and that is kind of mounted up front. Pigtail wires kind of sticking out the side, and it just reaches the spark plug. Over on this side, we've got the on-off toggle, and it was basically the kill and start switch. Pigtails for that. And this wiring comes already pre-installed on the motor. I believe this is the stator wiring, stuff like that. This is the starter wire right there. And up here we've got the whole rest of the wiring. We got, I think that's a voltage regulator. There's like a CDI box there. I might have those backwards, I'm not really sure. That is the starter solenoid, or relay, if you will. We've got the key switch, pigtail for that. So yeah, basically, got to dissect all this stuff, figure out where everything is going to kind of lay out, because these boxes and stuff need to be mounted to the frame in different various positions. Solenoid, key switch, all that stuff's got to go in. But to do that, I'm pretty sure I got to take everything apart first. And of course, they cover this stuff with like 17 miles of this crappy electrical tape. And I would just cut this off, but wasn't scared of cutting the wires. So that is the wiring harness stripped down. For the most part, I know where everything goes. You know, there's certain things, the handlebars and all that stuff, that electrical system's got to get plugged in. So it's going to be a little trial and error here, trying to figure out what'll fit, what won't. I may end up having to cut, solder, and splice things to extend them. But I don't know yet. So I think the best and easiest way to do this is to just do it. Okay, so we're plugging away here, making some progress. I got the battery the battery's not really hooked up. What I'm using here is the Murray battery, the jumper cables, because this battery is pretty much dead. I found that out the hard way. It took me a little while to figure that out. That's why the voltmeter's out here. And the thing that really upset me, that I totally freaking forgot about, is with these Chinese ATVs, you need to pull the handbrake to actually activate the starter, which I forgot. So I jumpered these two wires. They're like a spade connector, and I couldn't get anything to work until I remembered that. And once I hooked that up, everything worked good. So now everything's functional. As far as the starting system, obviously the charging system is not hooked up yet. You can see a lot of those wires exist over here, and they can't reach over there. So I think I am going to have to cut, splice, and extend wires, which sucks. But you got to do what you got to do. So we're making progress. I got a lot more wires to sort through here. It's just a nest of stuff. I mean, obviously the on-off switch is all functional right now. Well, the start switch. This is the on-off switch, I guess, technically. That's just a kill switch. But yeah, looks like I got to extend a bunch of wires. Alright, so I'm not going to teach you how to solder per se. I'll show you how I do it though. Two ends. A lot of people like to twist them together like that. If you do that, you're really not going to be able to get heat shrink tubing on there. It's going to be messy. You're going to have a kink in your wire. It's just not good. It makes it easier to pull apart. I put them together like that. Kind of try to give them a few twists. They sort of hold on. Take some of this resin paste. Smear that on there. You also want to make sure you've already got your heat shrink tubing on the wire. Just slide it up out of the way so it's not getting warmed up or heated up by the soldering iron or the process of soldering, because it'll start to shrink and then you won't be able to move it. Just keep it up out of the way. Make sure you put it on first, because if you don't, you're going to have to cut the wire and put it on later. You can use electrical tape, but if you're going to take the time to solder and do all this, I would recommend using heat shrink tubing. So it's going to smoke. That resin paste is going to pull the heat into the wire. You don't want to breathe that smoke. And then add your solder to the wire as you heat it up. Once you see those wires absorb the solder, you want to stop. You don't want to add too much solder, because it's really not necessary. And you don't want to apply so much heat that these jackets on these wires actually start to melt. But it cools off pretty quick. Slide your heat shrink tube down over your new connection. Make sure it covers both sides. Grab a lighter. Don't hold it in one place too long, or else you'll just light the whole thing on fire. But give her a couple passes with the lighter, and there you go. Professional looking connection. There we go. 5 nice spliced connections on this side. 5 spliced connections on this side. I'm going to stick this loom back on here to kind of cover up the wire. Going to get this all kind of buttoned up. I got the ignition switch mounted in the hood. Yeah, so I'm going to put this thing back together, and I guess then we'll start on the fuel system. Alright, so once we got the wiring all finished up, I actually went out to the hardware store and snagged a ton of hose clamps and a on-off valve, things I was lacking to hook this fuel system up. And you see down here I've already gone ahead and mounted and bolted in my fuel pump. I do prefer to have my pump below the tank if given the option, because then you're pushing fuel to the carburetor rather than trying to pull it. Reduces the risk of like an airlock or a situation you might run into where you would lose your prime. It's a lot easier to prime it. So now we just basically got to hook up the outlet of the fuel tank to the inlet of the pump, hook up the pulse fitting to the carburetor intake manifold, and then hook the fuel line outlet right there up to the inlet of the actual carburetor. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually remove this carburetor so we can go ahead and drill the intake manifold for the pulse fitting. It should just come right off, trying not to destroy the gasket, which it looks like I have destroyed the gasket. That's just awesome. Now I've got the threads started for the barbed fitting. You don't want to block off access to your mounting bolts for the intake manifold, but you also want to do this with the thing disconnected, just in case you produce some more shavings. Just got a regular socket here. You just screw this thing in until you start to feel it get really tight. You know it's sealing itself off. You also don't want to screw it so far in that you begin to obstruct airflow. I don't know if you can see inside there, but there's the pulse fitting sticking out right there. A little bit more and I think we're good enough. So with the carburetor now reinstalled, you can see I've got the pulse line installed onto the barb and runs down to my fuel pump over there. So I think next we are going to hook up the outlet of the fuel tank to the inlet of the fuel pump. And when we do that, we are going to be installing an on-off valve and our filter, because I want filtered fuel to go into the pulse pump so no debris gets in there and then ruins my little investment here. So you can see I've got my on-off switch plumbed in there. The line is very short from the bottom of the tank to it. There's literally just enough room for these two barbs to meet in the middle. That is because I have very limited space to get from here to there, and I still need to plumb in this fuel filter, which you can see I've cut the little ends off of the 3/16 ends. Cool thing is these fuel pumps come with these nifty little preformed fuel lines. So what I'm going to do is actually plumb the bottom of this fuel line right into the bottom of that. That'll help me make a nice tight corner, and I will add my filter and make the connection to the pump. So you can see the filter is now plumbed in, and it's kind of hard to tell. So I stick the camera down in here. That fuel line's about 1 inch long. That fuel line's about 2 inches long. And that fuel line's also about 1.5 inches long. And you'll notice I very intentionally put the fuel shutoff first after the tank. And that is because if you ever need to change your filter or service the fuel system, you can shut your fuel off right at the source and have minimal leakage. You won't have a whole tank load of fuel trying to empty itself all over the ground. Definitely handy, and something you really don't realize until you actually need it. Alright, so we got our fuel pump outlet, the fuel outlet hooked up to the pump. It comes actually across from behind the tank. It comes up over the tank here, and right here I've got my 3-way fitting, my splitter, and the return line taps right back into the top of the tank. You can see I have not hooked up the carburetor side of the fuel, and that is because right about now is a good time to make sure we've primed the fuel system. And you can see I put a little bit of fuel in the tank. I turned my valve on, and you can see there's a little bit of fluid sitting in that filter right now. So the only way to get fuel up to the top here is to run that pulse fitting, and the only way to run that pulse fitting is to kind of get the engine moving. So we're going to turn her over a few times with the electric starter and hope we get some fuel out of this line before it just tries to feed itself back into the tank. Alright, so here goes. Battery still doesn't have quite enough juice, so we're jumping it off the Murray. Oh. Yeah, we got fuel. Alright, so now theoretically, with the fuel system hooked up and the electrical system hooked up, it should be able to fire up now. It's going to take a minute for the fuel to actually get in and fill the float bowl before it's actually going to run. So this might take a second. My God, she's running. We need to turn this idle down a little bit. So I have to say, that was pretty successful. Very happy that everything worked out. I was starting to doubt it when the thing wouldn't start up. I was starting to think, you know, all that fuel's just dumping right back into the tank. Nothing's making it to the carburetor. But once it fired up and stayed running, I think the pulse pump had enough volume to supply both outlets. So now basically what will happen is when that float bowl fills, all that excess fuel that's being pumped, no matter what, is going to go right back into the tank and just cycle through the system over and over again. If anything, it'll just keep filtering everything, which will be great. We are very, very close to being done. I think I definitely need a new battery because I charged this one all day and it didn't work. So I think that one's junk. We're going to get another brand new battery. We're going to have to hook up the chain system, the sprocket. We're going to have to jack shaft a number 40 chain to whatever pitch that chain is. I forget what it is, but it's pretty big. And we need to work out a shifter mechanism. We're going to have to run linkages because I'm doing a slap shifter up here. So that's going to be kind of complicated. So yeah, not quite done, but we're getting very close. I say a couple more videos and I'll be riding this thing. That'd be pretty awesome. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Any creative criticisms or anything of that nature. Hopefully we can keep cracking on this thing. Get some more parts, get some more work done, and hopefully be driving it before winter. Thanks for watching.